My piece of advice would be don't ask for permission. And then the second thing I would say is like, do not try to fight the existing reality. Right? The system is designed to stay as it is, and the status quo is designed to stay as it is. So don't try to go and fight it. Build something else. Build an alternative. Articulate a narrative that is different, that shows, that paints what the future is going to be like. Don't forget about the arts, the culture, how you communicate your idea. And for me, that is that is the most important thing that you can do. It's like build something different.
Good local time, everyone. Welcome to Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. We're 21st century citizens doing our very best to interact with 19th century design institutions, built with information technology of the 15th century. This is how today's guest, Pia Mancini, described the core issue she hopes to address through her work. Good local time, everyone. I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. Welcome to Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. And I quote, we're 21st century citizens doing our very best to interact with 19th century design institutions, built with information technology of the 15th century. This is how today's guest, Pia Mancini, described the core issue she hopes to address through her work. Now, Pia is a political and tech innovator trying to reconsider what democracy could mean in the digital era and give our political institutions an update. Hailing from Argentina, Pia is co-founder and CEO of Open Collective, co-founder of DemocracyOS, chair of Democracy Earth, and, well, a very good acquaintance of mine. Pia is committed to solving today's problems with today's tools, using open source technology and also blockchain solutions to collaboratively rebuild democracy for the current century. So today we will talk about tech, politics, and how we can all build things that work for society of today, not for yesterday. Hi, Pia.
Hi, Audrey. Hi, everyone.
So Pia, what's your favorite 19th century institution?
That's a great question. It made me laugh when I saw it. No one ever asks me that. I have to say it's representative democracy. But it is because it was the best possible solution that we could create and design for the type of society, the type of information technology, the type of education that we had at the time. It was impossible. If you want to give everyone a voice, when your information technology is ink, paper, and a horse, then representative democracy is the best possible thing that you can design, right? It's impossible for everyone to be in the same room. And so having a few deciding the name of the many, and at least in principle, those few are accountable to the many every couple of years. That was a revolutionary design. It's a revolutionary technology. So yes, it has to be updated, but it still is by far my favorite 19th century institution.
Excellent. And you just referred to democracy as a technology, which is a very refreshing view on things. And you worked on DemocracyOS as an operating system, which is designed to build public participation in politics, again, treating democracy as a continuously updating technology. So I love this word you used, democratize democracy. This is a great phrase. And it allows citizens to read up on legislation, on discussions, cast votes, and is now being used by many governments outside of Argentina. So please tell us more about how this DemocracyOS thing come about. How does it work? What can you do on the platform?
Yeah. So DemocracyOS is a system designed for citizens to be able to participate in the decision-making process of how those decisions are made that govern our lives, that rule our lives. If you think at how representative democracy operates, we, the citizens, we are called to say yes or no to a certain cohort of people, to say, to decide between preset options, but we're never involved, or we're usually not involved in the design of those options, right? And so DemocracyOS was designed to kind of open up spaces for civic participation, for debate and voting that would involve citizens in the kind of daily decision-making process. It's designed for congresses, or it's designed for legislation mostly. It's not designed as an electoral voting tool. It's designed for debate and vote. And the idea is that you can feed it with legislation that is currently being discussed. And then one very key aspect of the platform as it was designed is that legislation is being explained as well, right? Because the political corporation, one of the tools that it has for pushing people away is making it really difficult to understand. Like legislation it's full of political jargon or words like legalese, right? Legal jargon. My husband Santi always says that lawyers are the hackers of the old system, right? They build into these kind of hacks in the code, in the language, that make it so that no one really understands, right? And so DemocracyOS is designed for that. It's designed to explain legislation, to have a debate, and then to be able to vote on that legislation. And really it's about bringing in voices of folks who cannot be sitting in that seat in Congress, but that shouldn't forbid them of participating, of deciding, of being part of this process. So that's what DemocracyOS is designed to do.
Okay, so sounds to me like it's augmenting, not replacing your favorite institution from the 19th century, right? It's not literally trying to take away the representative from the Congress. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a very, very good point. And I was, reflecting. I was in a deep conversation about the future of democracy 2 days ago, and we were reflecting, or I was reflecting about DemocracyOS and all of that period. And I think that whenever we think about digital democracy, whenever we think about new systems of democracy, we make this mistake over and over, that or at least it's perceived like a technology that will replace existing technology.
Like it's automation, but it's
Exactly. And so everyone freaks out, understandably. It's very difficult to build bridges, to build like a narrative together with the existing system if the narrative is like it's going to replace what's old. And also at the same time, I think even worse than that, it makes it almost impossible to fail. And that is dramatic, because if you're proposing something that will completely replace the system that we have, that system cannot fail. The new system has so much pressure that you can't experiment and fail. And what we need is to experiment, learn, fail, learn again, and try, because the current system of democracy, the current institutions weren't built in a day. It took centuries to get here, right? But when we talk about replacing, it's like shooting ourselves in the foot, because what we need to do is to experiment, and we need to fail, and failing needs to be okay. So I think augmenting is a really good kind of lens. It's a really good way of overcoming that kind of antagonistic narrative.
Yeah, but failing fast and pivoting sounds cool to people in the startup, also in the investment scene. But for the career politicians, fail fast. Well, it sounds high risk. So you mentioned previously that the political climate in Argentina has a high risk tolerance. And also, and I quote, new ideas have the tendency to flourish quite easily in a country in crisis. Can you tell us more about the landscape that has led to this kind of risk tolerance?
Yes. So Argentina, it's in the name, Audrey. It comes from argentum, from silver. That obsession that Argentina has with money, the issues that we have with inflation, with currencies, like in the stars. But so Argentina has traditionally had very high inflation. I think the currency lost 13 zeros, right? So right now we live in, I think it's a 50% inflation year on year. And so Argentinians are used to this level of crisis, right? Are used to having no control over their finances, knowing that what is stable today is going to be unstable tomorrow, that if you can purchase US dollars today, maybe you can't anymore tomorrow. In terms of innovation, I think it's directly related to the 2001 default, right? When Argentina defaulted in 2001 and Argentinians lost 1/3 of their savings, so much happened at the time, so much innovation was flourished and came from that moment. And I think what happens in Argentina is the risk of innovating and failing is lower than the risk of remaining in the status quo, right? Because the status quo is really bad and it's like going to get worse, right? So innovating is actually less risky in Argentina. That's why you're seeing all of these, the crypto movement in Argentina being so big, because saving in Argentinian pesos is like not an option anymore for anyone. Right. In 2001, when the default happened, there was this big political movement called Que se vayan todos. And it was this kind of anti-politics, anti-politicians, anti-government, but from a very visceral, we don't want any of you. You should all go away. You should all disappear. Like, we do not want these democracy, politicians, government, like, just go. And people were out on the street with pots and pans, just yelling for all of. And I think that from that point in time, it really still reverberates. It's still like what fuels all of the innovation in politics, in financial technology, in crypto that we are seeing today in Argentina. It comes from that moment of the country's falling apart.
Right, so it's still reverberating after 20 years now.
Yes.
But back then, you bridged into the representative democracy by forming your own political party. So why did you decide to get involved in elections via the Net Party, right?
It was a hack. We needed to hack. It was a hack. We needed to hack the system. We needed to make the system believe that we were a valid stakeholder. That they could interact with us because they could fit us in the box that they have for entities. You're a political party, you can participate in elections, you can talk to us. You're not a political party, you're just noise in the system.
I see.
And so it was like a Trojan tactic. We really wanted to become a valid stakeholder, a valid entity that could talk to government, that could talk to bureaucracy, that could talk to politicians and legislators, and in equal kind of footing. And from there, we kind of attempted to build something different. And it was, we kind of radically changed how political parties operate. We looked like a political party, but we changed how it operates, right? We had DemocracyOS at the center, and we ran for elections with this mandate that we would only vote in Congress what citizens voted on DemocracyOS.
I see.
Right?
So you're a power sharing party, right?
Exactly.
Agenda setting power is shared.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really the main reason why we did the party.
Okay. And you also talked around that time about a mismatch between the news environment and political systems. When did you realize that this was an issue in the kind of political landscape you just mentioned?
I think even before fake news was a thing, the politicization of information has always been very evident in Argentina. It was always used to, and everyone else, but my experience is mostly in Argentina in terms of running for elections. And the politicization of information was quite evident at the time. And there is this, I think it was only made worse by social media. And here I have like a huge, almost like a mea culpa, like when 2011, 2012, think Green Revolution, the student movements, the Occupy movements, right? Arab Spring, that's where we come from. And at that time, we saw new technology and social media as this tool that would make it impossible for politicians to ignore us, that would make it so that we would have this voice that we craved having. But we were almost like naive. We were in love with that technology, right? But we missed the flip side, the B side, right? That is the business model of these technologies, the business model of the internet. We didn't see it coming, and technologies today, social media, they're working as intended, right? They're designed to expand viral content, and that's what they do, and it works great. But yeah, I don't know. I feel that there was a whole movement around that time that we really felt that social media was going to bring something that it brought a lot of things, obviously, but I think a lot of positive things, obviously, but with that came a lot of negative, like weaponization of information to a level that was like absolutely bananas, and that's what we have today.
Yeah, the social media back then, 10 years ago, they were pro-social, right, in its social impact. A lot of the more antisocial effect didn't really happen until, they become choke points for advertisement to function. And with that, a lot of things. So I feel that because I was also involving Occupy movement back then.
Exactly.
Right. So now we're talking about re-decentralization and so on. But back then, you already talk about, as I quoted, democratizing democracy itself. So where does that idea come from? What keeps you motivated to democratize the biggest technology itself, democracy?
Well, I still think that there is this disconnect between the political system as it exists today, democracy as it exists today, and the society that it's intending to govern. We still have that piece of technology that was designed in the 19th century for another society, and it's out of sync with who we are today. We're still forced into these silos that are nation states. We're represented by the territory, and I feel that a lot of the noise that we see in the system in terms of anger and rage and again, que se vayan todos, make everyone go away, that feeling of like, I don't trust anyone. Like trust in the system is like always, every year is all-time low, we just keep going down. And I think that noise in the system and the silence, the apathy, you and me know that it's very difficult to get folks to participate, even when you open the spaces, right? Opening the space, like really convincing the status quo, building this these tools, it's like, I don't know, maybe a tenth of the problem, of the solution, right? The other 90% is getting folks to engage. And the reason why it's so hard, it's because they have a system that, they've always been recipients of a monologue. We have a one-directional communication system. And so why would you participate? And so I really think that we need to overcome this disconnect. We need to redesign the systems that we have and make democracy more democratic, because today we have the tools to do that.
So to democratize is also to connect in a plural way. As you mentioned, it should not just be radio and television and monologues, talking heads, or the internet equivalent of those. The internet is there for interconnection. I totally agree. Now, after a short break, we'll be back talking about some geology, geometry, and geography. Now let's do some geometry. Your organization, Open Collective, is committed to, and I quote, helping circles in the world made for triangles. Now, circles refer to communities and triangles for the legal institutions. So how do we build a world for those circles?
Yeah. Well, communities are circles, right? They're groups of people that are coming together because they have a purpose, they have a shared mission. And say they want to receive funding, right? Because whatever, they want to print stickers, they want to pay themselves, they want to hire a venue, they want to do a campaign, whatever it is. Sorry, the TV just moved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So communities are circles. They are groups of people that come together because they have a shared mission, a shared purpose, and they are, let's say they're interested in fundraising. They want to receive money because they want to, I don't know, rent a venue or pay for stickers or compensate themselves. Now, those circles of folks that are coming together, when they want to receive money, they need to kind of stretch a little bit and, smooth sharpen their round corners so they can fit into...
Set up a Linux foundation.
Exactly, which is the only thing that the system understands that can receive collective funding, right? Communities today, sure, some volunteer or an organizer can receive money themselves personally as an individual, but if they want a way to receive and spend money for their community without having to be a foundation that has a president or a company that has equity, or they have to be somewhere in the world. Why communities need to be incorporated somewhere? So think about an open source project, right? You just mentioned Linux, but any other open source project. They have, it's a group of developers, maintainers, technical writers that they might never meet ever in real life. And they're still creating immense value that is like harnessed by any tech company for free, right? It's used by any tech company. And forcing them to, where are they going to open up a bank account or a legal entity, in which country, who's gonna be, it's like saying who's the president of the internet. It doesn't have any sense, and so Open Collective, what we really, our goal, like the top high-level mission of Open Collective is to spread power and wealth, right, while rooting it in communities. What we want to do at the core is move money from the center to the fringes and put money in the hands of the communities that are doing the impact world, without forcing them to become triangles, to become something that they're not. So Open Collective it's a constellation, it's not things, is a platform, opencollective.com, which is a technical platform that allows communities to raise money, spend it transparently. It's a payments gateway, it's an open finances management tool. And we pair this piece of technology with a network of hundreds of entities, nonprofit entities mostly, around the world, who act as custodial of the funds for these communities. Because at the end of the day, we need to connect these communities with the legacy system. Someone has to be able to talk to both, right? And so this network of legal entities is talking to the local governments, tax authorities, reporting, what have you. And these communities are just focused on their work. So we are just letting communities focused on their craft, on their impact, on their mission, and we solve everything else for them. So that's how we are helping communities today, these circles, navigate a world that is really designed for triangles.
In the impact investment world, people talk about exiting, right? If you get acquired a triangle by some larger triangle, then hopefully you join a triangle that share the same purpose, the same mission as you. On the other hand, there are also successful social entrepreneurs that went to the public offering. So through public offering, of course, you tap into shareholder capitalism, but the danger, of course, is sometimes, someone may try a 51% attack on your mission. And so you mentioned during our conversation before, a different sort of exit. It's like not joining the public market, but not joining a larger triangle either, by turning a project from something that's triangular into something that is even more rounded, that is joined by intersectional communities. You call this exit to community. How does that work?
Yeah. So as you say, like traditionally startups can get acquired by another company or they go to the public market. We are furiously mission driven. Like for us, the mission that we have that is making communities sustainable is like the most important thing. And one of my obsessions, I have many obsessions, Audrey, you know that, but one of my obsessions is to make sure that we are safeguarding this mission for the future, that we are future-proofing this mission. I think in 50 years' time, right? So in 50 years' time, I'm likely not gonna be the person like driving Open Collective anymore, right? So what happens? Like what happens with the current set of stewards of Open Collective and its mission that is protecting this mission really well because we created it, but we've done it 10 years ago. What happens when we're not around anymore, right? Or when we want to move to other ventures, or we simply cannot keep working the way we're working. And so the way that we have of safeguarding this mission is exiting Open Collective to the community, which means transferring ownership of a privately held company that has a cap table, that has investors, that has a board, that is Open Collective Inc. We're going to transfer those shares to something, likely a trust, a perpetual purpose trust, perhaps a DAO, it's unclear, perhaps both, but that new kind of entity is going to hold this platform for the community. At the core, Open Collective Inc. is technology for the commons, right? Right now we have 15,000 communities that are using Open Collective to sustain themselves. They raise like $40 million a year for themselves. So like, those are a lot of livelihoods, right? That technology needs to be owned and governed by the community that it serves. Because it can't be that the decisions at Open Collective are taken solely looking at the bottom line, right? Solely looking at economic growth or growth or revenue. And it's very difficult to not do that in the long term, right? Unless you are, especially if you go public. And also if you get acquired, you lose control of your mission entirely. You might trust that the new triangle is good, but nothing guarantees that. So the path forward for us is to transfer ownership from our investors, myself, employees, to the community. And it's really easier said than done because it's a huge challenge, right? The Open Collective community spans across the globe. It's this constellation of nonprofits, individuals, open source maintainers, the solidarity economy movement, mutual aid groups in gazillion different countries, donors, foundations that put money, individuals that put money, communities that grow and then die. So, like, how do you, like, it's this beautiful mess. How do we, design a path for this community to govern and own open collective? It's one of my favorite challenges today.
Well, that sounds like democratizing democracy.
Exactly.
So, because our audience, we have public benefit trusts here in Taiwan, but many people consider it quite triangular. In the sense that it's maybe there's a board of trustees and so on, but this is by definition a kind of hierarchical relationship between the board that steers it and the input from the public. But you also mentioned DAOs, which are the decentralized autonomous organization that Vitalik talked about in our previous episode, which is anything but a triangle, right? It's just dots everywhere.
Yeah. It's barely a circle. I wouldn't even call it a circle. Yeah.
It's not spherical. I think it's just like stardust, right? and it's a constellation shape, right? It's a constellation. So how can you? It sounds actually even more challenging than triangularizing a circle or turning triangles into circles. What you're trying to do is to take a public benefit trust, which is like a very fixed institution, although it's for public benefit, to the least organized organization type possible, which is a distributed network. So how would that work?
Yes, I have no idea. That's a good question. No, really, we are. We are right now these are uncharted waters, right? Mm-hmm. What we're doing here is like we're trying to design the blueprint for privately owned companies to be able to be owned and managed by the community. Mm-hmm. You have a couple of ways of thinking about that, right? You could think of, we're going to do like a global co-op of thousands of individuals that is going to own open collective. So that's one way of thinking about it. You can do this trust, right? That the board of trustees is elected by the community at large, for example, and it has the mission of the responsibility of protecting the mission. You could do it via a DAO, right? Which in some ways, it's both the easiest and the most complicated arrangement, because the easiest because you have the financial mechanism in place, which is like you can do a token equity swap, and it's easy to do to share tokens and for folks to acquire tokens. And it's very clear that those tokens have like a governance role. But at the same time, it's the most challenging because it has built in a fair bit of assumptions about human behavior and greed into it. And I think, Audrey, that for all my, technologist past and future, I think that the problems are still fundamentally human, right? The challenges are still fundamentally human challenges and not necessarily technological challenges. So I think that with any of these three options, the real work, like in participatory politics, has to do with how do we teach, learn with, how do we help communities own a piece of technology like Open Collective, for example, and manage it? Like, what does it mean to govern, right? Like large commons or infrastructure, digital infrastructure for the commons. What does it, we are not used to, we don't even know how to. What does it mean? And so all the work has to do with really working with our community in understanding what this community ownership really truly means. Is it shared revenue with the collectives? Is it decision-making but not shared revenue? Is it everything together? Is it voting just for a board of trustees? Or is it like a much more sovereign individual or individual sovereignty, like a token, in a DAO, right? Like, I think that the really the big process here is how do we design this with the community, and I think that it's experiential. We need to go through the process, to live the process, fail in the process, understand the process, and improve the process. So that's how I'm thinking about it. I am less concerned about the structure itself, and I'm more concerned about how we're gonna get there. Because the last thing I want to do, Audrey, is like behave like a referendum. Right? What happens with referendums in democracy? Politicians
that's
are like,
also an exit. Yes.
Right, exactly. It's an exit to community. A referendum. It's like we can't, we can't decide. We're going to throw it to the community, to the people, and get them to decide with zero context, zero information, bad information. We're going to boil it down to a yes or no issue. We're going to make it binary, and then we're going to, if it goes wrong, it's going to be their fault. So the last thing I want to do is do that. And if I go through all the process, I do the DAO or the trust with the DAO, the co-op, whatever it is, and then I turn around and like, hey, everyone, this is Open Collective. It's our gift to you. You now manage it without learning together how to do it. I'm just setting everyone for failure. So this is like my long-term vision is really now that we have this this minimal setup for E2C already kind of thought out. Now all the work has to do with the community and kind of learning and teaching how to manage digital infrastructure for the commons.
Excellent. I'm reminded of the movement called public code. Or public money, public code, which is the other way around, right? It starts with cities who are already representatively democratic, and they want to share the software code and the regulatory code that they use. Maybe they use DemocracyOS, maybe they use XRO, maybe they use Consul, maybe they use Decisdim, and so on. And then they want to join a network of cities that are deploying some of these public infrastructure. So they start with some communal management, but they do not have to exit to a referendum across cities because cities are already self-governing in some real sense, right? So I think that's almost like the inverse of what you just described, which is which sounds more like you cannot just exist to a community because no democratically governed habits already exist.
Exactly.
But in the city's case, well, we vote for mayors, right? So that's different. But you also talk about cities as open networks, which is interesting because we were talking about networks of people in a DAO. But you put it on one level up, right? So networks of cities. And indeed, cities serves as a very important unit for not just public infrastructure, but for activism to change the world in general. Usually it's not an entire jurisdiction, but like one or two cities within it that try something new. So what do you think makes cities so special?
I think cities... I think that the nation state as the political unit that organizes power today is going to decay because it's losing a lot of its monopolies and it's losing a lot of its purpose. So where is that power going to shift to, right? I think that it's going to shift to two places. It's going to be shift up to the planet as a jurisdiction, we as individuals, that we come together as a network of peers, that we share a planet. We are a common. The planet is our commons, and we come to that as individuals, right? So that's like a level up from nation states. But then I think that power is going to shift to a level down, which are the cities. Because cities, and I think that we're going to see this increasingly as we move to a more distributed generation of energy situation where we're less dependent on extractive energies that need a lot of investment and a lot of controls. And as we move to distributed generation of energy, cities will take a larger kind of power or role in society, I think, in terms of like organizing power. Excuse me. So, and cities are perfect units for this, right? Because there is that really good, they're close enough that that people can make decisions that have impact in their daily lives, and they can participate. They're kind of small enough that, daily interaction or face-to-face interactions or kind of neighborhood building of networks is still possible, but at the same time it's large enough that at a global scale that kind of unity has impact, right? And a network of cities, for me, it's a dream. I am a big believer in networks and the power of networks. And so think about, for me, I always think of the future as a series of signals that we can see today. I don't think no one can really predict future, but you can kind of spot the signals, right? So when Trump was president of the United States and they pulled out of the Paris Accord, this movement sprang up of citizens, but also corporations and universities that were like, we don't care if the United States, as this construct called the United States, is pulling out of the accord. We're still going to abide by it, whether the United States signs or not. And for me, that was like a very clear kind of signal from the future, because it doesn't matter, right? There's things that cities can still do, and they can still participate and abide by these kind of global agreements, even if the national politicians decide something else. For me, that was a very good signal of like, wait, maybe networks of cities can also represent me politically, instead of the country, but a network of green cities around the world. Like, I would give them my decision, my voting power to them for all things climate justice or distributed generation of energy or green energy. Why do I need to give it to Argentina? No way. And so I am a big believer not only in cities, but in the power of this kind of network of open cities.
Well, so they're open in the sense that they're neighborhoods with other cities by value, not by physical distance.
Yes.
Did I get that right? Okay.
Yes.
I think this is a very powerful concept. And if sufficient amount of cities rally around certain community purposes, such as open collective, maybe you solve two problems with one innovation.
There you go.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yes. So after a short break, let's talk more about open networks. And we're back. So Pia, when we talk about a network of cities, well, we think about cities. On the other hand, there are many non-city areas, the rural areas. And in this, Taiwan is maybe a little bit different. Although we have 23 million people, ever since the Taiwan high-speed rail has connected the northmost Taipei to the southmost Kaohsiung with just an hour and a half, it feels like a city. And on the eastern side, because we have broadband as a human right, it's far easier for us to imagine community because, well, people share the same access to the broadband. But I also understand Taiwan is somewhat unique in the world in this case. In many different jurisdictions, the rural areas are not yet connected by broadband internet, or even if they do, they're not freely accessible. And so it creates a disconnect from the people in the communities in the rural areas and the open communities we were talking about. So how do you think we should work and interact with people in the more rural communities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I love how you said that about imagined, because one of my favorite books, and I'm digressing here, but is Imagine Communities by Benedict Anderson. And yes, absolutely. So it's Benedict Anderson studies how the nation states came together by kind of the books and the printing press enabling folks to imagine part of the same collective, even if they never seen each other. So I think that now we have these imagined commons, right? On a bit like at a scale that was, crazy, and maybe we're even thinking about an imagined Mars in the future. Like, it seems like the time that we're living is amazing. Anyway, so I think that you're pointing to two different problems there. One has to do with the digital divide and the access to the technology itself, right? And Taiwan is by far not the norm in terms of the level of connectivity that it has, right? I wish. And so we are participating in a project at the moment that is tending to build network providers as cooperatives in rural areas in the United States, because it's not just about getting the network provider there, it's also guaranteeing that those people will never kind of not have access, or they're not. Some folks in the United States are still paying dial-up, imagine kind of in other less developed nations. And so cooperative ownership of network providers is something that is very doable, and there's a way of doing it that works for a certain size of rural area, right? Other areas, I know that they've been experimenting with kind of other more bootstrap mesh technology for access, which it's fantastic, but I think we need to kind of bring it to a level up, right? It's not going to get everyone there yet. So I think that there's one issue that has to do with that, and broadband as a human right is like, it makes it, it just drives the point home. Until we have that, then all our conversations are somewhat lacking, right? Because we're still. We say that having a voice in this world, having a voice cannot be an accident of birth, cannot be a factor of where you're born or living, right? That's what we say. But until we get the technology there that enables them to express that voice, we can say that, but we need to make it reality. So that's one set of issues. And then the other set of issues is once we have that technology there, how do we make it so that it's more appealing to have a healthy democratic debate than going and raging on Facebook, right? Or Truth Social or Reddit or 4chan or, whatever. So what I think that there has to be, and there is already like a lot of thought, investment, like serious money going into thinking and designing public spaces that are digital but are conducive to healthy democratic debate. What does that look like? How do we design for healthy public discussion in that digital realm? That is like one of our biggest challenges right now. Globally, I mean, right? We have no idea how to do that, right? We're experimenting, which is great, but we'll still have a lot of work to do. Twitter is not it. That's clear, right? So yeah, I think that you point really well to both of the challenges that they have.
Yeah, in Taiwan, we found that it only works if we bring the technology to where people are. That is to say, people far prefer live streamed two-way conversations than easy to digest text input and outputs, because when you're trying to bring context across different lived experiences, well, the more bandwidth the better, the lower latency the better, and only when the initial like mutual support rapport is brought by this very high speed face-to-face or post-pandemic almost face-to-face conversations, then we can bootstrap those online town halls based on the lived-in experiences of face-to-face conversations. So as digital minister, I tour around, I go to people, I go to town halls, bring with me the live streaming crew, instead of asking anyone to come to Taipei, because that will decouple them with the immersive context.
Yes,
so I think there's a lot of interesting design issues to be worked through. In a sense, the pandemic helped for us because we need to figure out together how to communicate context across what previously thought to be just a weak link connection, that is video conferencing. But I think we need to scale it up and out and deep for it to truly work. Yeah.
Absolutely, and practice, right? There is this book by Fishkin called Deliberation Day. And one day where, everyone comes together and makes decisions on high-level priorities, for example. I think that this needs to be... I think the problem lies in the incentives of the system. We have a system, like imagine if you had a system that was ruled by sortition, right? By randomly selected decision maker. So anyone in Taiwan could be called to be a decision maker, right?
Like juries, but
Exactly.
for administration. Yeah.
Exactly, like juries, but for administration. So imagine if anyone could be called to say, hey, it's your duty to come debate and vote on this issue, or for this year, you have been selected, right? If that is the technology, then all the incentives in the system kind of shift, right? Because you need to make sure as a system that everyone is able to participate in these debates. You need to ensure that everyone has the ability to take the time to do it, or we compensate them for the time, has the ability to process information, has learned how to process this information, has access to experts, right? So the incentives in the system kind of need to shift gears toward ensuring that anyone could participate, everyone could make a decision. So I think these town halls, participatory democracy processes, decision-making, citizen juries on panels are amazing sandboxes. And the real kind of shift is going to come when we manage to align system incentives with that.
That's right. So this sounds very similar to what we just talked about in the previous part, which is aligning the incentive for cities, the administrations, and the free software and open source community that supports the digital infrastructure, including digital spaces of those cities. And only when they align do we have a kind of easy to bootstrap formula that can exit to community, both in a real sense and also in the imaginary sense, like for the cities that are not yet having a strong free software community, they can, through the power of DAOs and so on, find people who share values with them and are able to then build a relationship to identify with that city, even without being physically born in that city, for example. But that takes a very different definition of a citizen. Because previously, a citizen in a city, in a polis, is because you're born there, not because that you agree with the value of a green city network, right? So what we're actually talking about is a reimagination of citizenship. And I was reminded that you talked previously about how unfair it is that where you're born, which city you're born in, determines whether or not you get a voice in politics. So are these two different ideas connected? How can we help innovate and build tools for the people who are born into decidedly non-democratic jurisdictions or cities, but they nevertheless want to identify with the democratic cities?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Every time we talk about updating democracy or upgrading democracy, it seems to me like we're only talking for half of the world, right? And the other half, we're like, well, they're not even in democratic countries, so what can we do? And so that is always like such an important issue, because like we are talking about the planet as the polis, then we need to make sure that everyone has at least some way of exercising agency, right? So what technology do we have today? Like, I don't think, again, like if I'm looking at the future, like I think we're in a transitional moment, right? So I don't think we don't have it yet. Right. So I think I see signals. of where we can go, of what there looks like. Right. But we're still here, very much here, but not really here. We're not here or there. We're kind of trying to transition. Right. And so obviously blockchains for me are a very interesting piece of technology here, because in some way blockchains are able to coordinate collaboration at scale, right? So if you think of currency, that is like, the first very obvious example. A currency makes sense if people buy into that currency, right? So nation states have forced currency down people's throats. Again, they're like, you are born here, you transact in the currency that I want, whatever. That's how we get buy-in, by forcing a population to transact in a certain currency. And then, so DAOs or crypto communities, or the W3 space, or blockchains, the Web3 space, it has that capacity to coordinate collaboration that thousands of people around the world, or hundreds of thousands of people around the world, millions of people around the world, can buy into that technology, can buy into that set of assumptions, can buy into that currency, can buy into that DAO, right? That a DAO has a set of assumptions, right? A set of an inflationary or deflationary kind of algorithm. It has more or less openness. It has more or less privacy and protection. It has, right? So you more or less transparency. You buy into that. So unfortunately, most of the population that still lives in non-democratic governments doesn't have the level of access to this technology that would allow them to fully participate, right? So that's why I say I think this is a signal, it's not a reality today. But if I look at Argentina is like a weird example, right? Because Argentina has a huge community that is using DeFi, decentralized finances tool. It's using crypto to liberate themselves from like this currency that the government is imposing, right? But not only that, they've learned the technology. So they're also, if you look at any project today in the metaverse, any project, it likely has Argentinian developers, because they've also learned technology that is very well paid and very sought after globally, right? So they're not only liberating themselves in terms of like a currency, but also they are, developing the skills that they need to kind of be top of their of their field in the worldwide, right? So I'm very bullish about Argentina, and because of that, I'm kind of bullish about what the impact that this technology can have in other countries like Argentina. Now, if you move to far less democratic countries, I think it's a lot harder to see how it's going to crystallize today, right? But I think that is one technology that can enable us to collaborate at scale, for example. And then I would say that the other thing, Audrey, I think we need to, again, seriously fund, put real money into privacy, and internet freedom kind of tech. Yes. Like Tor is underfunded, like there's no tomorrow. That for me is crazy.
I think the right to communicate, of course, is the underpinning. Without that, there's no right to assemble meaningfully, or the right to associate and form new currencies. All that relies on the right to the freedom of private and secure communication. So that's definitely the case. A lot of our audience to this show is young people around 18 years old or younger. So what advice would you give to someone around that age who hears all about decentralized autonomous organizations, about how to free the future, how to make it possible to build a network based on the open protocols and values and on impact, instead of on the triangular hierarchies, right? Because people in their very early years, they by definition are not on the tip of the triangle. And we've seen a lot of like really good social innovations come coming from people who are in their 20s or even younger. And we were both in that place before, right? So what advice? Yes. But what advice would you give to someone who wants to form a net party or to start working toward transforming democracy worldwide?
That's a really good question. I think that the first thing that comes to mind is like, it's a bit of a used phrase, but I think it still holds a lot of value. That is like, never ask for permission. You know, just open tooling, open source, these open collectives. The reason why they're open is because you do not need permission to participate. Right? You can just go and do it. The technology is there, it's open for anyone to use. You can rebuild it. These open networks, there hasn't been a time in history where you could participate in the spaces that are generating both the economic value as much as the social and cultural value as right now. Like, all of those spaces are open. And I guess it's up to you. Right? It's up to each of us to participate. So my piece of advice would be, don't ask for permission. And then the second thing I would say is, like, do not try to fight the existing reality. Right? Just the existing reality is what it is, and the system is designed to self-perpetuate. Right? The system is designed to stay as it is, and the status quo is designed to stay as it is. So don't try to go and fight it. Build something else. Build an alternative, articulate a narrative that is different, that shows, that paints what the future is going to be like. Don't forget about the arts, the culture, how you communicate your idea, because for me, that's, we need to, what does the future smell like? What does it look like, right? We need to articulate that narrative. And for me, that is the most important thing that you can do. It's like, build something different and make sure that the storytelling is there, the narrative is there, the bridges are there, and that's going to propel us forward.
Indeed. So permissionless innovation and free the future through open collectives. Thank you so much, Pia. That was really great. And I really took away the idea that adversity, even crisis, can be a powerful reason and an important rate of hope for people who need to innovate and also connect to the world. With your optimism and the call to action, I'm really confident that we can update democracy for today's world. Now, for our audience, please check out Open Collective and other Pia's initiatives. And check out our TaiwanPlus website too. We've got a YouTube channel, and if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and share. The audio version is also available on the podcast Decentralized platforms. Now, we love seeing your comments, so until next time, live long and prosper.